guys, welcome to Monday night. Another Monday night podcast, another Monday night episode. So, we'll just give it a minute for Shakti to hop on, and then we will get started on tonight's topic. I'm still getting used to, I just got my haircut today, and I'm still getting used to what it looks like in the camera. There she is. Hey. Since it's adding you. There you are.
Hey.
I was like just realizing like before you had hopped on, I was like having so much gratitude for the fact that we do this together. Because like, you know how it is when you're like used to someone else being there and then they're not there and you're like, I don't really know what to talk about. I'm not used to talking about myself. I mean, I am used to talking about myself, but not on Monday nights.
Not this energy. It's
Right.
different.
Right.
It's different.
I was like, where's my person?
Where's my human? Yeah, no, I completely get it. I'm like in love with my travel wallet, you guys. These things are the bomb. If you don't have a travel, it says Bon Voyage, first of all, which is like so freaking cute. But it holds like boarding passes so well, checks everything. I'm obsessed. I like big wallets anyway, but I'm like obsessed with it.
I love that.
So I'm organizing myself post-trip, which, as you know, is like a giant walking disaster. So I'm trying. I literally was asleep before 9 o'clock. Like, I was sleeping before my alarm went off. Like, hey, you have to do a podcast. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. Not kidding.
I was just sharing in my story about how I like cannot stay awake during hypnotherapy. Like, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It does. I do it in the morning. I do it in the afternoon. I do it in like evening. I do it at
Doesn't
night.
matter what it's about.
No. I'm like, okay, this time it's going to be good. I'm going to be good, right? And then all of a sudden, like tonight, I'm just like fucking snoring. Like, it's not even like I'm like I've gracefully fallen asleep. It's like I wake myself up from snoring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That happens to me.
Oh, wow.
It happens to me every time. I'm like, where was this when I had trouble sleeping as a kid? You know, like where nobody talking about hypnotherapy back then. Hell, such an effective way to go to sleep, right?
Oh my God, I'm out every single time. I'm lucky if I can make it like 5 minutes in, but yeah.
All right, we are sharing this out. Rejection and how we are perceived. This is a really important topic.
I know. Well, like we talked about, there's so many different areas of it, right?
It's funny because it all spans from that same behavior, that same source. It just shows up in like these different ways, which I think is really interesting. And I don't think it's a coincidence that so many people are experiencing this at the same time. Like when we were all together at the conference, that came up in like different ways in everybody's life. Like everybody kind of had the same aha moment. Like from Meta Tribe and then from Freedom Tribe, everybody was kind of having the same realization. It was like a domino effect. Everybody was like, oh my God, I'm doing that, you know. And it was all about fear of being rejected and how you're being perceived and, you know, whatever. It was all kind of the same exact story. So I found that to be really interesting. And then what was even more interesting was that while at the conference, everybody was having kind of like the exact same awakening around the same behavior, which was so interesting, right? And we didn't even talk about it like together. It was like individually that happened. And then towards the end, when we were like, oh, what was your takeaway? We all said the exact same thing. We're all like, whoa.
That's crazy. That's awesome, though.
Yeah, it was so weird. It was weird. So that's why I think this is probably really energetic, like collective thing. Like a lot of people are probably experiencing the exact same thing in many areas of their life. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, that's always how it works, right? So this came up. Well, this has come up, like Shakti said. She was just at a conference where this came up. It's come up with a lot of my clients, but then it's also come up with us, like just having normal conversation. Just like, oh, we really want to do this thing, and we have the same fear of rejection, which is a really old fear. But how it's been coming up with my clients is that it's been really rooted in perfectionism, right? Like this need to be perfect, this need to be perceived a certain way, this need to control how we're being perceived. And every time I've talked to again variety of clients in regards to this topic, I'm like, the only reason you ever feel the need to be perfect, or we have this need for perfectionism, is because you have the need for love, validation, and acceptance for someone outside of you, right? You need someone or something outside of you to love, validate, and accept you, because you're not taking that responsibility on for yourself. And this also ties into people-pleasing behaviors, right? We, again, feel the need to say yes to everything and everyone, and be a people pleaser and stay in our little box because we don't want to, disrupt what's going on. And so why is that? Again, need for love, acceptance, and validation. But then when I was digging deeper with some of my clients, I was like, where does this come from? Like, how is it that so many of us have this fear of rejection and feel the need to be perfect and feel the need to people please? And it's like this ongoing pattern and cycle. Where does that come from? And I realized that I would say all of us have been taught, not intentionally by our parents, but we have been taught that love is conditional, right? That love is conditional, and that if you follow the rules, if you stay within the boundaries, if you stay in your box, if you do the things that, it starts with our parents, right? If we do the things that our parents want us to do, then we receive love. Now, this is not to say that their love actually changes for us, but the meaning that we have attached to their words, their behaviors, their actions, how we perceive a situation, we have perceived it as, if I follow these rules, if I stay in this box, if I do these certain things, then I feel loved. And if I don't, right, through punishment, consequences, whatever, then the love feels like it's withheld. And so I'm going to keep doing whatever I need to do to receive love, which is why we hold on to patterns, which is why we hold on to stories, which is why we stay in shitty relationships, which is why we stay in shitty jobs, which is why we get addicted to the drama, right? Because we have learned that love is conditional when it's not, but that's what we learned, and what we believe, that love is conditional, and we have to stay in certain situations in order to not be rejected, in order to receive love. So the reason the work that I do is so deeply rooted in self-love and self-care, which, Shakti teaches as well, it's because when you learn how to take care of yourself and how to love yourself unconditionally, you break free from the need to be perfect. You break free from the need to people please, and you stop caring about rejection, because you know that no one actually has the power to reject you.
And I'm going to take it back a little bit further. I'm going to take it back further than our parents, because this is an old, very ingrained behavior in our genome. Like animals, I'm going to take it back to the animal kingdom, okay? From an animal kingdom perspective, if you are in a pack, your likelihood of survival is really high when you are in the pack. Your likelihood of survival is dramatically lessened when you are outside of the pack. So in order to survive, you are going to engage in the behaviors that are acceptable within the pack, thereby ensuring that you survive. We have some of that programming still in that limbic part of our mind, our reptilian brain, where we don't want to be different and we don't want to stand out. because that might mean being rejected from the community, from the culture, from the family unit. And then that means our likelihood of survival is dramatically lessened. Okay? So this is pretty deep in the brain. This is pretty big in the brain, that you are going to do whatever you need to do to make sure you survive. And that's going to alter your behavior. And that shows up like people pleasing. And that shows up like being afraid of being rejected, because that fear is old as fuck. That fear goes back, way back, to times when being an individual was a disadvantage. It was not an advantage. In this day and age, being an individual is the single most advantageous thing that you can do and be. It is actually the opposite. But because our genomes don't upgrade like Mac software does, it takes a minute. Right? Like, we don't upgrade like computers upgrade. It doesn't work that way, right? And we are in this like fifth dimensional shifting reality. We are in between worlds, so to speak. A lot of us, some of us have already shifted completely into a new reality, new experience of reality. But some of us are still in this like in between shift. And so our DNA is doing all this weird shit, and we're discovering all these different sensitivities and abilities and perceptive abilities. And so we're caught between this, I want to belong and I want to be part of the community because that's that old programming in the brain and what my parents taught me, etc. And the new mindset, the new way of seeing the world, which is I am a unique expression of the whole, and that uniqueness needs to be expressed so that I can serve my mission and be of greater impact. And so these two things are pulling at each other for a lot of us, especially those of us who are working on our consciousness and elevating our vibration. It's pulling. You have these two ends, and so we catch ourselves in and out of authenticity without knowing it. It's not like we intend to do that, but we do that because we're not fully yet transitioned over to feeling secure in being authentically ourselves and being that individual that strikes out and leads the way and is a pioneer, etc., etc. So this conversation is really important, because how that fear of rejection shows up is, as we're going to talk about, can show up differently in different experiences of life and business and family, etc. But I want you guys to understand how old this patterning is and how old this kind of programming is in the mind. So when you're trying to go against it, it's going to feel kind of hard. It's going to feel there's a lot of resistance to going against this, because it is literally like you're telling your brain, no, don't worry, we're not going to die. And your brain is like, oh, wait, yes, we are. You don't understand. You know?
Well, and I think too, like, you know, Shakti and I work with clients on a variety of levels, and I think that, and we went through this, and we still go through this in our own personal life, where it's like you think you've been working on the thing, right? You're like, okay, I've been working on this, I've gotten a handle of it, and then you're like, why the fuck does this keep coming up? Like, but exactly
There's a whole new level.
But like, just like Shakti said, like, it is so deeply ingrained in our brains that it's not like you're just going to work on it once or twice or 3 times. Like, this is going to probably be a consistent thing. I don't know for how long, right? But like, I think that then what happens is that we hit this upper limit, right? It could, like, there's different ways to talk about it. Whether you want to say, you know, you're hitting the edge of your comfort zone, you're hitting an upper limit, like you're hitting this glass ceiling, right? But you feel the edge of discomfort, and it takes diligent practice to consistently step outside of your comfort zone and step outside of your comfort zone and step outside of your comfort zone, and have the awareness that when you hit this upper limit, that what ego wants to do is stay small to stay safe, right? Because that's what feels comfortable. That's what feels familiar. But it's actually the opposite. It's the opposite that you need to be doing in order to consistently break through.
100%. And I'll give you a very personal example, talking about business ownership. I have been a business owner for like many years of my life, and I've always had the same problem in every business model. It didn't matter whether I was, starting a coffee shop when I was 21 with a collective of people, or, being an intuitive reader, or doing massage, or now as a beach body coach and, helping my clients with their health and their nutrition. it was always about like reaching out to someone and connecting with them and then inviting them to participate in a workshop I was doing or a class I was doing or a fitness accountability group that I'm hosting or anything. It was like stepping out, looking at a person, recognizing that that person could really benefit from my help in some way, shape, or form. Like whatever I have is a really good fit for this person. And then the fear of inviting them, it wasn't even like what they were going to say. Like that wasn't even it. It was like literally just me having the courage to say, hey, I feel called to ask you to join this thing because I feel like it's a really good match for you. And for some reason, it would just like shut me down. Like if I did that, I was going to die. Like it was just like death was going to immediately come upon me. Right. And again, it's like this desire to want to be appreciated and seen and valued by my community and not seen as, you know, pushy or scammy or creepy or, you know, disingenuous. I think that's perhaps like the biggest thing for me is being seen as disingenuous, because that's so the opposite of how I live my life and how I want to live my life. So, and that's the thing, is like it shows up very specifically to like your character and who you are. Like fear of rejection is sort of like this like blanket thing, like fear of being rejected in general. But there's always like one thing in particular that you're like afraid of, that's like a trigger for you because of your character, because of your story, because of your history. And that's really held me back from serving a lot of people. And just this week I realized, like, dude, how many people could I have helped in the past 2.5 years, specifically with their health, that I know have been struggling forever and have never found a solution that works, and they just hop from diet to diet to diet and nothing seems to change. And I'm sitting here like not talking to them because of my reptile brain saying that I'm gonna die. like that's why. So that's just like a personal example of what we're talking about, like how that actually limits you, limits your growth, and limits your impact with other people as well. Not just like you and your experience of life, but that kind of a behavior also limits the way that you establish relationships with other people, and then their capacity to expand and change and grow as well. I think that's important to know.
And I've had a lot of the same triggers as Shakti has had when it comes to business. And I haven't been in as many businesses, but I mean, I was originally in network marketing for 3.5 years. And I'm back, but when I started, I felt like inviting was such an integral part of the business. And I was taught a lot of ways that didn't feel good, but I just thought like, oh, well, that's just how it's supposed to be, right? And so I know that in those 3.5 years, I invited people without having built a relationship with them first, right? So when I left network marketing and was solely focused on my spiritual mindset coaching business, I really like made it a point. I was like, I'm not inviting anyone. I don't care if I can help them or not. Like, I'm not inviting anyone. But as Shakti's talking, I'm like reflecting on how difficult it is for me to ask for help. And I know I'm not the only one, right?
Of course
like give us some hearts if you struggle with asking for help.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so there has to be this common ground somewhere. Because like, if you guys aren't asking for help and we're not inviting you to anyone, everyone's fucked.
Yeah. No one's helping anybody.
No one's helping anyone. And Shakti and I both have the same core value when it comes to our desire to impact on a really large scale. And so there has to be, you know, some sort of common ground. And so she and I were talking about this today, and I was like, I'm really not living my core purpose or, you know, my core value of impact if I'm not inviting. But like she said, it's this deep-rooted fear, because we've all gotten those cold messages, right? Like we've all gotten those cold invites. We've all gotten those things that like are just like, oh, that feels terrible. And so it's like we're so aware of that you know, we're so aware of it that it's like I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. And so it's like you go to the opposite, like the complete extreme, and you're like, well, fuck, I'm just going to wait till everyone reaches out, like, which isn't really realistic either.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're just giving a very specific example of how we've dealt with the fear of rejection, and how it's kept our impact really small. Anne and I both share this huge vision of impact, and it's like if we don't take responsibility for our impact, we can't have impact. That's just what it is. So if you're a business owner and you're on here right now, I need you to hear that. I need you to hear that if you don't take responsibility for your impact, you can't actually have impact. And I think it's really important to understand that that fear of rejection or that fear of being misperceived is an internal fear. It's a fear of I feel like it's almost like a fear of almost not knowing yourself enough. It's not so much a fear of like someone saying something to you that could be hurtful, because no isn't really hurtful. Like just on a very, objective level, someone saying no thank you is like the most innocuous thing in the world. Like you're not gonna drop dead because someone's like, no, I'm okay. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like it's not really a big deal. But I almost feel like we have a fear of being misperceived or being rejected because we don't fully know from whence we come. Like we don't fully get that piece of like worth and like knowing self, so that when we reach out, or we have the courage to reach out, that the responses really doesn't matter. Like there is no, that doesn't change how you feel. You know what I mean? Like the response doesn't change how you feel. The action, how people respond to your actions or how people respond doesn't change your internal climate. I feel like that's more about developing this deep sense of knowing oneself and knowing from where you're coming from and where your heart is. And when you're really secure there, nothing really alters your internal environment. And that applies to business and operating a business, or just living your life and being afraid of your family saying something, or your partner saying something. Like when you really truly know who you are, which ultimately is child of God, right? Child of this magnificent universe and divine in all ways, and you're secure in that, and from where you're coming from when you're wanting to connect. It's like you don't have that. You no longer carry that thing of yours, like whatever someone else is going to say about this is going to change how I feel about me,
Yeah, it has to do that. It has to also do with, which is in the same realm, but like Shakti said, just hearing a no, right? That in itself is like not a big deal, but it's what we make that no mean about us, right? It's always attached to the story. And so if you allow it to just be a no or a not right now or a whatever, then you can let it be what it is. And if what your intention behind it is, if you know that your intention is pure, then, and actually, I mean, God, this is what I was just dealing with this past week, right? Where speaking of last week's podcast, like Shakti and I were working through something, and I really, that was part of my energetic struggle last week, was I knew that my intention was pure, and I knew, like, I know my heart, but there was still this fear of how am I being perceived? How are my actions being perceived? And does that change, right? This goes back to the conditional love. Like, does this change how Shakti views our friendship? Or does this change how she feels about me as a friend or as a person or whatever? And it's just such a deep-rooted thing that we have learned, that love is so conditional, that when you're having, a conflict or a discussion with someone, if you have this deep-rooted belief that love is conditional, and that you can't trust yourself, you can't trust who you are, you can't trust your intentions, if you've been told, at any point in your life that you're manipulative, like these stories are going to come back up. And so really tapping into when the story comes up, and you can hear it, and it's not a loving thought, it's not a loving story, asking yourself, like, who once told me that? Like, where does that story come from? Because if it's not loving, it's not yours. This is that you're, like Shakti said, like, you're a child of God, you're a child of this universe. So, and that is unconditional love. So if it doesn't feel unconditionally loving, then it's a story from someone else that you took on as your own. And that's all it is.
Yes. And to the point of this story, because it relates to all relationships, I think, I was very aware of this coming up for her during our conversation, of feeling like that fear of being rejected or fear of being perceived differently. And I think it's our responsibility, if we're in a relationship to someone and we see that that's happening, that they are expressing a fear of being rejected for who they are, and they're trying to communicate their needs and their feelings, and you can kind of sense the ease or discomfort. I think part of being a friend, or part of being a partner, or part of being a parent, or part of, is knowing when it's time to like reassure that person of like your love of them and their innate sense of worth, and like hold space for them. There's no need for you to not do that, even if there's conflict, even if there's tension. Like, you can easily hold a space of like, I know who you are at your core. I see you for who you are. This is just a conversation that we're having. It does not change the core understanding that what you feel doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean anything about me. It's not going to change my story about me. And it's also not going to change my story about you, because this is just a conversation that we're having and a situation that it's going to be resolved. And I think so many conflicts could be healed so quickly if we took responsibility to be that loving partner in a conversation, or that loving end of a conversation, of just like holding space and like not making those conflicting feelings coming up even more acute. And so this kind of veers from the whole, what we were talking about with like the business component, but in an intimate relationship, I'm sure this comes up a lot. And part of the reason we fight with our partners a lot is because we feel rejected. Like, they'll say something and then we get defensive, and then it's like this like, tit for tat conversation happening. And then they feel rejected because you said something shitty, and then just like everyone's saying shitty things to each other. You know what I mean? Instead of just being like, whoa, okay, like, yeah, I'm sensing that you feel rejected. Like, let me just tell you that I love you, and I that's not how I feel about you is not changing. We're just gonna resolve this conversation or this conflict. Like, I think that is our responsibility as a loving friend, a loving partner, a loving parent, etc.
And also understanding from the other viewpoint, right, that if you are the one feeling rejected, to be aware of that and know when you're being triggered, right, and understand that when you're in the middle of the trigger is probably not the best time to have the conversation. So again, like when this conflict came up, like as soon as it came up, I knew I was immediately triggered, and I was honest. I was like, look, I'm triggered right now, so I'm not going to address this right now, because whatever comes out is not going to be like, it's not going to help anything, and right. I really needed the time to step back and really figure out, like, why am I triggered? Like, what's really going on? Because typically when we're triggered, it's not just that one situation. It's not just like the one thing that was said, or the one disagreement. It's like this entire history, not just with that person, but it could be the rest of your family. It could be previous friends. It could be someone else who once rejected you. Like, it's when you're triggered, it's bringing up all the pain of your past that has not been healed yet. And so this is why I say, where you're triggered is where your work is. It is your work to be aware of your trigger and to heal what's coming up for you, and to not react from the trigger. And so, I mean, it took us days, and to really,
but that's like, the wise thing.
Yeah.
That's the wise thing. That was the wise course of action. And that's perhaps the first time I've executed that so consciously. And you know why? Because the stakes were so high in my love of a person. That's why. And it really brought to my attention and my awareness how little I take that into consideration with like my partner, my romantic partner, because we tend to take them for granted, right? Like, they're always going to be there. Guess what? That's not true. They don't have to be there at all to deal with your shit. Okay?
It's always like, a choice.
I'm hyper aware of that with my husband. It doesn't matter if we're married. It doesn't matter how long we're married. It's not okay for me to take that for granted. And I don't think it's okay for any of us to just take that for granted and use that, defense mechanism and, reacting right away when we get triggered. And I don't think that's wise at all. I think it does take a lot of work to know that where your triggers, where your work is. Like, you need to really slow down because the mind is so fast and it's just going to want to react immediately because, again, protection. It comes down to the same thing. You are wired to defend yourself from death. And everything that feels like a threat is your brain going, that's it, we're going to die. So either you're going to fight or we're going to die, and this is the way it's going to go, right? So it takes work for you to be like, brain, we're not dying. Like, no one's going to die. This is not a death situation. We can stop right here, take a moment, process, and come back. Like, that slowing down that moment takes time.
And it takes time, and it takes were you talking about, oh, you're talking about this in your video that that you did on IGTV, where you were talking about you know, that activists, for instance, probably don't have a meditation practice, you know, and so
y'all should go watch that video, by the way.
It was good. It was good. And so
but people try to be true.
She's talking about this, and I'm like, but it's so true. Like, and when I work with my clients, like, I see the big picture, right? I see the big picture. I see the path that we're headed. Like, I see how this all plays out. But when a client of mine is really triggered, like, I have to hold that space and remind them, like, go connect to yourself, go connect to yourself, go connect to yourself. And I know that, like, when I have clients who are very new in the self-care journey, they're like, how long is this going to take? Well, here's a little tip. Like, I've been meditating for a long time, but as far as tracking my meditating for an hour every single day, today I hit the 100-day mark, right? Like, that's no small feat that I've shown up 100 days straight, no matter what was going on in my life, and meditating for an hour every single morning. So, but that's a huge reason why I'm able to slow down and pause. And when I'm triggered, I'm able to take a step back. Like, self-care has to be the foundation, and understand that it's going to take time for it to build and build and build and build. Like, Shakti's been on her journey as well for a really long time. You know, the fitness plays a part in that. The nutrition plays a part in that. Like, it all incorporates together. And so if you're new on this journey, understand that it's going to take time to really build that foundation, to, like, set that foundation. You can lay the foundation just like you lay the foundation for a house, but it takes time for the foundation to really set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the video I made was in response to how we actively trigger our own anxiety and then affect everyone else with our anxiety. And a part of that is that people who really believe in separation, who are, like, obsessed with tragedy, which is what I call this, is like obsession with tragedy. You watch horror films and you wonder why you have anxiety, and you watch, like, docu-series of serial killers and you wonder why you don't trust anybody. And I'm like, hello, really? Like, you're wondering why you're having nightmares and why you can't sleep and why you're anxious? I can fucking tell you that, and I'm not a doctor. Like, you don't need a doctor to tell you that. It's really simple, right? But here's the other thing. Activists who are really like, I hate these people and I'm going to go protest these people and I'm going to, you guys, that energy, right, of the reason we react like that is because some action has made us feel rejected at our core. We witness something, it triggers the shit out of us because we feel rejected. Some core value feels rejected, some door feels slammed. We are triggered, and then what we do is we get that same energy of, like, hate and antagonism, and we go out there and we throw it right back at the opposing party, and somehow we believe that tossing around antagonism is going to create pacifism from fucking magic. Okay? And let me explain something to you. That's not how the alchemy of energy works. Okay? And I'm not the first person to say that. MLK said it way before I did. We cannot drive out darkness with darkness. Only light can do that. That's not just a really beautiful quote and really articulately said. It's the truth. It is the freaking truth. And what I guarantee you is that the people who are out at the front lines of resisting and protesting all this shit don't have a meditative practice. Why? Because when you have a practice of contemplation, you realize that you are not separate from all the things around you. And you become hyper aware of your triggers and why. You become hyper aware of your stories and why. You become hyper aware of how you are creating and expanding the illusion of separation and making yourself separate from things around you, and how you are actually pulling the strings of everything in your life. You become so aware of that you cannot communicate that way any longer, and you cannot behave that way any longer, because now you have a new awareness, and it literally rewires your brain to see the world differently, to behave differently, and to speak differently. And I can always tell when someone doesn't have that practice because of how they communicate and because of how they respond and react to things in the world, the news, politics, whatever. It becomes really obvious who is not doing those things because they are so reactionary and because they are so black, white, separate. This is not me. This is me, that energy is not the energy of oneness. It is the opposite of that. That's what the video is about.
100%, 100%. And like Shakti said, like, I can always tell on social media, like, especially with everyone who's like sharing all that fear. First of all, if you have a lot of fear in your news feed, if you have a lot of hate in your news feed, unfriend and unfollow. It is that simple.
Unfollow.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're like not even like really friends with them, just unfriend, like, whatever you need to do to not have it popping up in your news feed. Because I hear from so many people like, oh, I need a break from social media because it's so negative. I'm like, well, then you're following the wrong people. Like, you're just straight up following the wrong people.
Did you know that? You press like and you press follow. What you mean you need a break from social media? What kind of social media are you making? And here's the thing. This is what trips me up. People are like, I need a break from social media. I need to go on vacation. You know who's going to go on vacation with you? You. And you know who creates a drama? You. So you're going to get to the Bahamas and you're going to be sitting in your lawn chair with your mind fucking going 100% an hour because, like, you can't relax because you took yourself to the Bahamas. This ain't about social media. This ain't about your environment. This is about you. This is about you and your triggers. Like, you're going to take you wherever you go. You can go half across the world. You're still going to show up in some lawn chair somewhere and feel the exact same feelings. It's not going to change until you change.
Yep. I can't tell you how many times I've run from myself only to find out that bitch is everywhere.
I'm going to buy a new house. Guess what? You're living in it. I'm going to move across the country. Guess what? You're there. I'm going to get a new boyfriend. Guess what? You're still the one he's dating. You're still that fucking person.
Yep. And this is why we tell people, like, good luck trying to escape it. You're going to have to go down that path at some point. At some point, there's no other choice, because every other path is going to be blocked off, and it's going to be the most painful path.
And all the fingers are pointing at you. It's the same with money. Like, oh, when I have $1 million, I'm going to be, no, you're not going to be nothing. You're going to be the exact same way with a lot of money, and you're not going to know what to do with it, so you're going to disappear it. Because that's what money expands who you are, my people. Let me have you understand this. Money does not make you anything. It expands who you already are. So if you are someone full of anxiety and full of fear and full of like, I'm going to lose it and I'm not going to be able to have it, and I'm like, you're going to lose everything. That's because you go wherever you go. You cannot outrun your triggers. You cannot outrun your fear of rejection. You cannot pretend they aren't there, because they will show up. And if you're sitting here watching this video going, I wonder why I'm in the same relationship over and over and over again. I wonder why I make the same financial decisions over and over and over again. I wonder why I can't lose the 30 pounds I've been telling myself I'm going to lose since 2008. This is why. Because you go wherever you go. And part of watching this, the reason you're on here, the reason you work with any one of us, is because we see that. And so we hold that space for you, and we remind you through different avenues of the truth of who you are. And we help you get there because we've done the work. We've done a lot of work, right? But really important that you understand that your triggers are like messengers, and they're not going to go anywhere until you pay attention to them. They don't just evaporate. Like, they're there forever until you deal with them.
And we've said this in so many different episodes, but I feel like it's important to remind you guys again that you have a choice how you view your journey.
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice how you view your journey. Now,
Yeah.
we would both be lying to you if we said that we were always joyful during our journey. That's a lie, right?
No.
No, but there have been so many moments where we're like in the shit, right? And then it's like it breaks and we just start laughing and we're like, it is not that serious. Wow.
No.
It is not that serious, you know? And
No.
so, again, why we call this relax, this is going to suck, because yeah, there are going to be moments that it sucks. But if you are constantly resisting your journey, saying, I wish it wasn't this way, I wish it wasn't this way, I wish it wasn't, I can't wait till this is over. If you can't wait till it's over, you might as well just pull up a chair because you're going to be there a while.
Be over. It's never gonna be over. Ever. Ever. It's just, that's so incredibly true. It's that could not be more true. And I think, man, I think about how many opportunities we lose on a daily basis for fear of like pushback of any kind. Like, you know, people don't go dancing because they don't want to look dumb. I'm like, dancing, one of the most inherently like joyful things that we can do with our bodies that everybody likes to do when nobody's watching because it feels good to move energy through your body, but you hold back from going to an environment where a bunch of people are doing it together because of how you're going to be perceived. Like little things like that, or you won't go to your kid's birthday party because of, you know, what are they going to say, or you won't, you know, we make these small choices every single day because of what other people are going to think or say about us that really limit the quality of our life. And we don't even know that we're doing that. We think we're just normal and everybody does it. And you can't really know that until you push that limit and you step outside of it and you look around and you're like, oh my God, life is like completely different on this other side of the fence. Like there's a lot of different things happening over here. And this is why reflection, contemplation, having a coach, having a community, all those things are so important, because without that ability to be in it and be in it and be uncomfortable and be uncomfortable until you break through and get to the other side, you can't really know what it's like on the other side of that. And then you just kind of step up to the boundary and then you back up and then you step up and then you back up. And then you live an entire life of, well, I almost could have been blank, or I could have done blank, or I could have, and then you know you're dying. And what's everyone's number one regret when they're dying? What is the number one thing they said? I wish I wouldn't have cared as much. I really wish I wouldn't have. I wish I would have done more of what I loved. Why are we going to wait till we get there to have to look back and say that? That's painful because you can't get back your time this life.
Yep.
Once it's gone through. Don't get there. Don't wait till you get there to look back and say, I wish I wouldn't have given a fuck what anybody thought about me and done what I wanted to do.
Well, and I think about too, like how many people say, you know, once I'll finally live my life once I retire. I'll finally live my life, you know, I'll make all this money, I'll stay in this job because that's what I do, right, for the security and the benefits, which no job is secure. You create your security, right? And benefits, honestly, don't really matter. Like, I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm living
a story.
I'm living I'm living just fine, you know? And actually, I was listening to Abraham Hicks, and I've heard this before, but I was listening to the book Money and the Law of Attraction again, and it's such a great book. Well, at the beginning, Jerry's talking about how for 20 years, they didn't have health insurance, they didn't have benefits, they never got fucking sick. It's a belief, it's a story that you tell yourself, and it's a story that we've been told, right, that we need to have all these things for protection, which is completely living in fear-based world. But anyway, we hold on to this life that we're not really happy with because we fear what could happen to us if we let it go. So then we just follow the crowd, right, and say, well, everyone else waits till they get retired, so I'll just wait till I retire also. There's no guarantee that you're even going to live until you retire, first of all. Second of all, if you're living that much fear, I can pretty much guarantee you that your health is going to be shit, and you're not actually going to be able to do the things when you retire that you want to do now. So whatever life you're wanting to do now, and again, totally plays into our fear of rejection. The only reason you're not doing what you actually want to do is because you fear what everyone else will think about it. You fear what everyone else will say.
Absolutely. And that's why you don't, tell your mom what you actually think about her and her codependent relationship to you. That's why we don't tell her to get the fuck out of our lives. That's why we don't, this is why we hold on to so much, because we're just afraid. We're afraid of the kickback. We don't want to have kickback because we're afraid we're going to get rejected and die. Like, understand that this is ultimately, it all comes down to that one fear, like the basic fear of like death and destruction. Like, everything leads down that funnel. So having a self-awareness practice is really important, so that you begin to realize that this fear is really illusory and it's not a real thing. And we've just kind of decided that it is. Like, we are impermanent and nothing really is here and gone. Everything just is, and that's the reality of all things. And when you have a really deep contemplative practice, you really get that at like a core level. And you also get that nothing can actually hurt you. You begin to really deeply understand that nothing can really hurt you. So you living your authentic life and speaking authentically and showing up authentically and being authentic is not dangerous. You begin to really get that at like a soul level, that you are safe being who you are, showing up as who you are, and operating in the world as who you are. But without that quietness, to be able to plug in and realize like who you actually are and whose you are more deeply still, like, you will forever rely on this like conditioned relationship to other people. And what is this person going to think or say, or constantly altering your behavior, altering your language, altering your way of showing up in the world, because you don't want to be ostracized out of any community, which eventually makes you feel so small and so contracted that it actually starts to hurt you from the inside out. And that's such a painful place to be.
Well, I think about how many people struggle to speak their truth, right? Especially how many people we work with who struggle to speak their truth. And what we had to go through, what we had to work on in order to be confident enough to speak our truth. Like, I think that Shakti was probably a lot more outspoken for a lot longer than I ever have been. It's taken me many, 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 many years to really work through that, to feel confident in speaking my truth. Because obviously every person has their own story and their own journey and their own path. But I would say that every person you look up to, every person who inspires you, who speaks their truth, who lives their life out loud, who shows up unapologetically, has some sort of self-care routine. They have to. They have to have some sort of self-care mindfulness practice to be able to kind of rise above the bullshit that has previously held them back, in order to have the confidence to show. No one just is born with confidence. That's not a thing. I mean, you're born with confidence, but then it gets smashed. And then you have to like find it again.
Yeah, I was fortunate to be born with a lot of contrast really fast. And I just took that contrast as my opportunity to like practice courage, I guess, and practice like going against the grain in some way. That's just like, I think, programmed into my being. I'm not really sure how I was born that way or how I did that, but don't think for a second that the people that are living authentically and living out that you admire are doing so because they don't have contrast in their life, or are doing so because they're just accepted for who they are. Like, that's not true. The people that you probably admire for being like really bold and really brave and like speaking really authentically are probably the people who have faced the most contrast of anybody that you know. And they've just made a decision to not let that define them. And they've seen the value in making it a learning experience and then going out and teaching like we teach on this podcast to you guys about what we've experienced. And I'm actually about to record an episode where I talk about an experience I had in high school, very few people know about, which really shaped me and really taught me the value of taking a stand for something and really, really going against the grain and really facing a lot of rejection. That was like my Rosa Parks moment, like for the LGBTQ community. It was a really big fucking deal. You know, got in the news, like almost got me expelled. It was like a really big deal. And at that moment, I realized that what happened after I did that thing and took that stand, so many young people in my environment took a stand as a result of that thing that I did. And it was me putting myself on the line, quite literally, on many levels. But when I got to walk the hallways of that school and see all of these young people express who they are without fear because of that decision that I made, I realized that I would be willing to take the punch any day so that I could look around and see other people feel good about themselves. And I want you to hear that, because when you take a stand for who you are and you show up in the world authentically, you are giving other people permission to do that just by being who you are. You have no idea who's watching you. You have no idea who's listening to you. You have no idea who is following your journey. And you have a responsibility, if you're alive on this planet, to be an example of what is possible, not of tragedy. We have enough of that. We have enough of that expressing in the world. So it is your responsibility to demonstrate what it's like to live a life that is true to who you are, so that other people can see that and say, I can do it too. And that is how we create change in this world. It's not one savior that drops from the sky and stops this wrecking ball of a disaster. It's every single one of us waking up to the truth of who we are, owning it, giving each other permission to do the same thing, and by that happening, changing the ethics of our community and the way that we see each other and communicate and support each other. That's how that works. That's why you getting over your fear of rejection is so essential. Essential for ascension. Essential for our evolution. It is essential for the good of this country and the good of this world. Like, you need to do it. You need to get over it. That. For that reason alone.
And that right there is the power of community. Like, that right there is the power of community, because doing it on your own is, you're going to, if you're trying to do it on your own, you're going to consistently be hit with contrast, right? And which is why Shakti and I have communities available, right? Yeah. It's not just about our own personal coaching, but we have communities available so that you're not trying to do this on your own, because no one does it on their own. No one.
Yeah. And when the one time I did do something on my own was that time. And it was so scary, and I nearly died of fright. I literally was like shaking. Like, I'm gonna go on IGTV after this and share the story, because I feel like it's really worth sharing and people need to know. Like, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I can only imagine, had I had a community of people who were constantly in communication with me and supporting me and holding me up and seeing me for who I was, how different that experience would have been, you know, and how less afraid I would have been of doing what I did. Yeah, I wish I would have had what I have now then. That would have been wonderful.
So you understand the value of it even more. Like, when you haven't had it before, and then now you have it. Yeah, you totally get it.
Absolutely. So now I hope you all feel this like weight of responsibility that I have delivered to you. But seriously, like, understand that you overcoming fear of rejection is bigger than just you. Like, it really is. It's your children are watching. Your young ones are watching. Everybody who's young in your family is watching you for cues, social cues. That's how kids learn how to be in the world. And your friends are watching you for social cues as well. What's okay, what's acceptable, what's not. And you can't even imagine the impact you're going to have on the people in your immediate life when you start living the life that's yours to live, and not the one that you think is yours to live or you've been told is yours to live. It's really dramatic, and it's really rewarding.
100%. When you were talking about, you know, kids watching and all of that, like, again, I don't have children, but I think about, you know, the young kids in my family, and I got a lot of pushback when I talked about hitting the road. I got a lot of pushback. I got a lot of, what the fuck are you doing? Like, it's so dangerous. I got a lot of pushback from not going home for the holidays, spending the holidays by myself because that's what I felt called to do. Um, and I got some pushback as far as like, but these family members want to see you, children specifically. And I had to finally say, like, the best thing I can do for these children is to show them what it looks like to live authentically and to follow my heart. Me going against who I am and what I desire, and coming home, or going to visit family during that time just for the sake of doing it, is not serving anyone. And so I am more than happy to have that conversation with them, but I feel like leading by example and showing what it looks like to live a life of authenticity and integrity speaks way louder than going against what my soul is telling me to do and to people please, right? This goes back to people pleasing, and it happens a lot with family, right? We feel like we need to people please, and I'm telling you that, like, you are more important. Your soul is more important. Your heart is more important. Whatever you're feeling called to do, there is nothing and no one more important than you. You have to be whole. And I mean, you're always whole, but you have to feel whole. You have to feel that wholeness and really connect to yourself first before anything else, so that you can really show up and be that light for other people. There's nothing more important than you connecting to yourself.
Yeah. Amen.
And on that, I think we're done.
Yeah. Perfect closing.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for hopping on. We're here every Monday night, same time, 9 EST, 8 p.m. CT. We do have a community. We're both part of the same community that's health and fitness focused. We offer monthly accountability groups for people who are really wanting to focus on their nutrition and their fitness, and also their mindset. A lot of that is thrown into a group. It's not just food and fitness. It's us. So of course that conversation is all over that community. We also do have a community of coaches that we mentor who want to do the work of going out there and helping people with their nutrition and fitness as well. So if that's something that's of interest to you, there's going to be an open house tomorrow night. It's an event. I will post the link to the event in here if you'd like to learn more about what we do as coaches and what that entails. You can meet some of the team and get kind of a feel for what we do. We'll be talking about the conference that we mentioned at the beginning of this video. And if you just want to reach out to us individually as well, you can. Feel free to comment below or message us, whichever one is better for you guys. But we are always here to serve you guys and help you guys with all the myriad of tools that we have. Know that reaching out is really not that hard, and you won't be rejected, and it's not going to be so scary, and you're not going to die.
We're going to open you with welcome arms.
All right. So
all right,
have a fantastic evening. Until next time.
Have a good night.